Welcome to the next episode of VCF Breakroom Chats. I am Sejong Ha, a product marketing engineer at Broadcom. In this series, we bring Broadcom experts to discuss VMware Cloud Foundation and speak about industry topics that can help you in your daily work. Today, I am excited to talk to Alan Renaud. Alan is in product management at Broadcom and will discuss the new VCF 9 improvements delivered in the platform. Alan, can you tell me more about your role at Broadcom?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's great to be here, Sejong, joining you for a coffee. Thank you very much for inviting me. So, yeah, I'm a product manager here at VCF, and I work on the core platform of VCF 9. I've been at Broadcom/VMware for around 15 years now. I think one of the highlights, many highlights in my career, but I think the one that stands out the most for me was one time I was lucky enough to stand on stage with Pat Gelsinger and put him inside of a virtual reality headset and kind of had him walking around stage, throwing virtual machines into the cloud as he migrated them and managing his data center with a VR headset on. It was great fun to do that. But today, I guess my role is a little bit different. I'm here today and I'm excited to talk to you about VCF 9, which was recently gone out. It's in the hands of our customers now. We're seeing them do wonderful things with it already. But I think, we want to talk more about what those capabilities are and how it's coming together to improve the operating and operate that private cloud.
Yeah, VCF 9.0 was a major release with lots of engineering work. I want to start out by asking you, what has changed in VCF 9.0 versus VCF 5.x? Because I know you work on the platforms, on the platform aspect of it, and I know you're working on, what would you say would be the major areas of improvement to this platform?
Yeah, I think, this is the biggest thing that I wanted to talk to you about because I see a lot of people pointing out like key features, key little things. And I know as people that use technology, we often focus on those little things that make a huge amount of difference to what we do because, because maybe I'm a storage admin and I get really excited about this new vSAN feature. Or, maybe I'm an infrastructure admin and I get really excited that vMotion can now vMotion like 4 seconds faster than it used to. But I think the real capabilities and what we did with VCF 9 was bringing everything together, really integrating it as a platform. It's something that we've been talking about for such a long time now, and our customers have been asking us to do this for such a long time now. I mean, I remember back in the days of like vCloud Suite, we called our product to vCloud Suite. We brought out a bunch of different components and kind of added them together and said, hey, you can now use this as a vCloud Suite. But really, if you looked under the covers, there was no suite part of it, right? It was just a bundling of a bunch of components that kind of layered on top of each other and created that layer cake. But with VCF 9, I think there's a real difference here. You're really seeing that integration. You're really seeing the glue between each of these components and everything coming together. And I think today it would be interesting if we talk about kind of 4 key areas that I saw in VCF 9 that really fundamentally make a difference. The first one, which I know you've been focusing on already with people like Susie and Mark, is the deployment. Making sure you can stand up that private cloud and making sure that you've got all of those components installed in the right way and up and running for you to do that work. Once that's done, the second thing I would say we should focus on is really around operations and lifecycle. How does VCF 9 make that easier for me on day 2 when I have to actually go out and manage these things? The configuration and architecture, there's definitely a lot of things that we've changed about the way that these things plug together and work together. That means it's a lot more integrated. So let's deep dive into that a little bit more. And then finally, the private cloud is nothing if nobody can use it. And therefore that consumption interface, or in this case, VCF automation really has come leaps and strides into a totally different product than it ever was before, and really gives our customers the ability to consume that infrastructure that gets stood up by the admins and create containers, virtual machines, services, whatever they want to expose to their organization.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like before, we were all different business units, and the products work together, but really, really working together is happening now under Broadcom, where we're just one main product, which is VMware Cloud Foundation, and just everything just is more seamless now with all the work that you and your engineering teams have done. So, I recently spoke to your colleagues, and then you know, uh, we're talking about things like life cycle management experience. And I know you're looking at that as well in terms of how that fits in with the overall platform. I was wondering if you can talk about that experience there at a high level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely go back and watch the great videos that you did previously with Mark and Susie. There's a lot of detailed information in those where they kind of deep dive into it. But at a high level, I would say, previous to this release, it was kind of hard to stand everything up together, right? It was all individual appliances. It was like, you might start off with Virtual Center and ESX, and you're probably used to deploying those. But then you would go on to move to use some of those other components, and each one had kind of a different experience, a different way to deploy these things, a different way to get to that end version of your VCF cloud being stood up. We made some changes before to bring out Cloud Builder. That kind of made things a little bit get better, a little bit more tied together, but at the end of the day, you still had to fill out some complicated Excel spreadsheet, really
What's the
understand.
5.x experience
Yeah,
you're
the
talking about?
experience wasn't fantastic, right? I mean, let's be honest. It was hard to kind of get to that point where you had your cloud up and running. But now in 9.0, with the bring out of VCF installer, that whole experience has been completely overhauled. And I think standing up your infrastructure now through a guided wizard interface, first of all, that really lets you choose your own journey, whether you're deploying your first fleet, whether you're deploying additional instances, whether you're starting off with a previous version and importing things like Virtual Center or operations because you already have those in your environment and you just want to bring those along and update those. Everything has really come together into that unified VCF installer that really enables you to deploy this stuff quickly and get it up and running, not only from the UI, but also from the JSON interface as well. I mean, previously in a role at VMware, I used to be heavily involved in automation using some of our tools, and certainly as a customer, I would maybe do things through the UI once, but after you've done it once, that was enough for you to understand how it worked. And when you're standing up 50 or 100 of these things, you want to automate everything. So VCF installer being able to provide that JSON file and validate the JSON file and the configuration input, use that to actually deploy that infrastructure and really stamp out what your fleets look like and deploy them one by one, or what your instances look like, is super powerful and gets you up and running even faster.
Yeah, so that's really great. So you and the team have made it a lot easier to get the customers up and running. What about the day two operations like, patching, capacity management, basic management? I mean, these previously required jumping between different user interfaces like SDC Manager, vCenter, then
Yeah.
ARIA Lifecycle. What is that experience now?
Yeah, exactly. It comes back to what we're talking about with that integration, right? I mean, customers are certainly used to Virtual Center. They're probably used to the ESX UI for when they need to go under the covers and look at that. And then as they kind of build out and they start to expand and scale, they get more interested in things like metrics, cost visibility, show back, charge back, all of that kind of stuff, because they're starting to manage more and more infrastructure and need a way to kind of give information about that. So what they used to do is start off with like ARIA operations, right? Well, in VCF 9, ARIA operations now becomes VCF operations. And VCF operations is no longer just about metrics and cost visibility and showback and chargeback, but it really brings you that front single pane of glass that our admins can use to manage the entire private cloud. So it's that central place that admins can go to make sure that they've got everything up and running, that it's stable, and that they can configure and build anything that needs to come as part of that. So, that handles tasks like, workload domain deployments, some of the lifecycle management that we just spoke about. Once you're up there and you actually got it installed, being able to go in there and actually take a look at the components you've got deployed, being able to handle upgrades, patching, adding more of these components in there is all centrally now done through VCF operations. So there really is no more of kind of jumping between those UIs and API interfaces to achieve what you needed to. Used to be, 4 or 5 different interfaces you would go into to do this core functionality, but now it's all in that central location. As well as that, there's new functionality that's been added to VCF operations that brings in even more ways to manage your infrastructure, your instances, your SDDCs, your virtual machines, your hosts, and your fleet in one single pane of glass. So what I'm talking about here is things like the unified single sign-on. So now being able to use VCF Identity Broker to actually hook it up to one of your identity providers that you might already use in your organization, something like ADFS or Okta, and then actually use that authentication to log into the interfaces that you need to manage your cloud infrastructure as well, and enable that single sign-on experience for all of those. Other areas are things like certificate certs and passwords, right? These are those kind of, it might seem like a little thing to reset a password or to set a policy on a password, but suddenly when you have to do that against multiple different components in the entire private cloud, it becomes one of those mundane things that you hate doing, because in an integrated platform, as soon as you change one of those, one of those passwords or one of those accounts stops working, then you've got issues all over the place, because that single account might be used for integration between one component and another component that you're not even aware of and you've probably forgotten about, right? So as soon as you go change that, it becomes a huge problem and things start falling over and breaking. Well, with VCF 9, having that centralized way to manage these certs and these passwords, renew those certs, update those certs, change your passwords, change the rotation of these passwords, make sure that they're compliant with everything that you're doing, and manage these from that ops interface is a huge time saver for admins, let me tell you.
Right. You mentioned some concepts there. There's this new term fleet that we introduced in VCF 9.0. I think about things like fleet of cars or a fleet of ships. What is the goal of fleet and how does it enable private cloud scale?
Yeah, good question. And I think your concepts are very relevant here as well. Yes, definitely a fleet of something, right? So like I said before, right, when you think about what our customers used to do, they used to build out and scale from ESX and then up to virtual centers and clusters and then multiple virtual centers, hundreds of hosts, thousands of hosts into SDDCs, into now what we call VCF instances, which house multiple SDDCs. You've got things like management domains, workload domains. Well, really a fleet is a hierarchical grouping of more than one VCF instance. So that VCF instance allows you to manage multiple SDDCs or multiple virtual centers and thousands of hosts and tens of thousands of virtual machines. And that fleet hierarchy really brings you things like VCF operations and VCF automation and some of those fleet components that I was talking about a moment ago and capabilities, and gives you the ability to actually visualize and manage and use those under one umbrella or that single pane of glass. So a fleet is exactly that. It's a fleet of instances or SDDCs in this case.
Right. Yeah. So now we have the infrastructure built and ready to use and, help our customers with the operations part of it. How can our customers consume it? We're moving towards a private cloud consumption model. How does VCF 9.0 simplify consumption of those services, VMs, containers, as well as the networking, storage, and security configurations for, multi-tenant environments?
Yeah, good question. I mean, up until now, we've been talking about the admin, right? And we've been talking about how to stand up this infrastructure, manage this infrastructure, how to abstract these different parts of the infrastructure into different layers, and then how to kind of visualize those and manage those and provide metrics and costs back, and all of that is great through VCF operations for the admins. But at the end of the day, that infrastructure is there to be used, right? Not just to be managed. What is infrastructure that isn't being used? It's there for no reason. So really the heart of some of the greatest enhancements that were made in VCF 9 is from that consumption interface. And in this case, VCF automation is that consumption interface. So it really provides our customers a way to give their customers, our customers as in the admins of those customers, to provide that infrastructure out to their teams or their projects or their areas of the business that want to consume this. Back when I was a customer, we had numerous requests from people that wanted to create their own virtual machines, and the only way to do that at the time was really to give them a view into Virtual Center or to manage that for them. So it wasn't a great experience for them. And Virtual Center is more geared towards an admin. It's not geared towards somebody that just wants to stand up a virtual machine or stand up a network, or even in today's terms, when you're talking to developers, these guys want to actually, guys and girls want to actually stand up the entire infrastructure through code and provide different services, whether they're networking, whether they're containers, whether they're full infrastructure. They want to do all of that through code as well. So these kind of different personas, they need a way to consume that infrastructure that's now been stood up by the admins. And as I said, that's VCF automation. VCF automation has been expanded in 9.0 to not only be that single consumption model for those virtual machines, but also extend out those lower level constructs that we have from things like NSX, and allowing customers to create their own VPCs in their own area that they can work in and isolate those applications into. But also really a huge focus has been on providing developers what they need to be able to consume the infrastructure as well through the tooling that they're used to doing as well. So allowing those applications teams to consume things like networking resources or compute resources, some of those underlying kind of NSX fabrics and those VPCs, and really use those to, first of all, deploy their containers, their applications into these areas. But secondly, to kind of have that visualization into what's been deployed, what that looks like. And also, one of those great areas that I saw integration from, in fact, this reminds me of when I was talking to a customer around a year ago. They were like, hey, great, you're allowing me to create these containers and our customers to create these containers. And I've given that to my developers, and they're off and running. They're able to create containers and services as much as they like, but they still have to talk to me because problems happen. And when problems happen, they blame the infrastructure. They don't blame the application that they've written. And they don't really have the visibility that they need into that lower level of the infrastructure to prove that it's not an infrastructure issue. So, bringing that back, like in 9.0, one of the great things and those kind of tighter integration points that we've been talking about is now the ability to actually see those metrics about what your applications are doing once you've deployed them into VCF automation. What are these metrics? What is the CPU usage doing? How does that relate to the infrastructure that it's running on? How can I be certain that it's not an infrastructure issue and that it's an application issue that I'm encountering right now? And therefore, how can I fix this faster as a developer rather than have to ring up the infrastructure team or log a help desk call and then wait for some process where we jump on a call together and have to work through this and then dig into some of the lower areas of the platform to work this out, right? So yeah, that VCF automation really has become that front end for deploying those containers, those virtual machines, really any service that's needed by your organization, allowing them to create that in their own boundary or their own VPC so that they don't cause issues with other areas of the business, so that they have those isolated security models that they need as well. And then use that infrastructure that the admins have set up and can extend under the covers to give more and more to those consumption teams.
Yeah, it's really cool how VCF operations is so intertwined with VCF automation and how they're both working in lockstep to deliver that private cloud experience for our customers. Alan, thanks. That was a huge amount of information. But if we were to take away something, what would that be in terms of that experience?
Yeah.
Open-ended question for you, but yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like this has been a great conversation. We jumped around all over the place, and that's what I really, wanted to do because the proof is that it's now a complete private cloud infrastructure, right? It's not just some admin infrastructure and then some other components that are used for consumption, some other components that are used for networking. All of these things really are integrated, and I really can't emphasize enough how much power that gives you when you start to use it and how much time that saves you when you start to bring these things together. So I guess if there's like three key takeaways, the first one would be like operational efficiency, and the way that you can now through this bringing all of these components together and creating this private cloud for you, how you can save time, how you can lower those operational risks for admins, and how you can consume that platform as well. Yeah, secondly, it would be like the architecture from VCF 9 is completely different. It's evolved from VCF previous versions, but it really does bring everything together. You have a way to upgrade to that, and VCF installer does a great job of enabling you to do that. And yeah, really using that architecture to provide that private cloud for both the administrator, using those operations after it's been deployed, and then again that consumption level is really bringing everything together. The third thing I would say is that VCF 9 delivers that full life cycle governance. Once you've got that deployed out there, it doesn't stop there. VCF automation does a great job of bringing everything together, providing that full life cycle governance of making sure that everything is updated, making sure that everything is patched, security patched, that there's no warnings. The dashboards are now focused around you managing your entire fleet, understanding where the issues are, being able to fix those issues, as well as enhancing all those areas that we had before around that integrated cost visibility, the chargeback tools, and then providing IT organizations the financial transparency they need to pass those costs back onto the business, and really provide that true private cloud experience for everybody, whether it's the consumer or the admin.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Alan, for joining today. Great information.
Yeah, thanks, Sejong. It's great having a coffee with you.
Cheers.